You've watched The Cosby Show, probably more times than you can count. You remember the sweaters, the brownstone, that Theo scene everyone still quotes to this day. But here's the part nobody tells you. You didn't really see it. Because hidden inside those same episodes, the ones you've rewatched for decades, are details most fans completely missed. Not small things either. I'm talking about moments, decisions, and background details that quietly change how you look at the entire show. And the crazy part? Once you see them, you can't unsee them. There's one in particular, the last one, that caught even longtime fans off guard. So before you watch another episode thinking you know everything, here are 8 hidden facts about The Cosby Show that were right in front of you the whole time. Fact 8. The Huxtable living room was a $1.5 million art gallery, and most people never noticed. Now, if you're a real Cosby Show fan, and you're still here, so I see you, you know that Huxtable living room like the back of your hand. The warm glow, the big, comfortable couch, the staircase where Cliff would appear at the top, like a king surveying his not always cooperative kingdom. But here's what almost nobody noticed while they were smiling at whatever chaos was unfolding on that couch. Every single piece of art hanging on those walls was real. Not prints, not replicas, not something a set decorator grabbed from a furniture store on a Tuesday afternoon. Original, authentic, African-American artwork, curated personally by Bill Cosby himself, with a combined value of over $1.5 million. Let me be specific, because specificity is everything here. Throughout the show's 8-season run, the Huxtable home featured original works by more than a dozen Black American artists, including Cynthia St. James, Varnette Honeywood, and Ellis Wilson, artists whose work was largely unknown to mainstream audiences at the time. These weren't borrowed pieces. Bill Cosby owned them personally and brought them to the set season after season. And this was a deliberate, intentional choice. Not decoration, a statement. This was 1984. The word representation, meaning the idea that what you put on screen sends a message about who matters and what life looks like, wasn't really part of the mainstream television conversation yet. But Cosby understood something that very few people in his position were willing to act on. The background of a scene tells the audience what kind of world they're watching, what kind of people these are, what they value. By placing real, valuable, celebrated Black-owned art on those walls, without ever drawing attention to it, without a character stopping to give a speech about it, he was telling the audience something important. This family is cultured, educated. They have taste that was earned, not assigned. And it is completely, entirely normal. Here's the detail that hits hardest when you go back and rewatch. In scene after scene, the characters walk right past those paintings. They're talking about homework. They're arguing about the car. They're eating. Nobody stops and says, "Isn't our art lovely?" Because to the Huxtables, it just is. It's Tuesday. The Varnette Honeywood is on the wall, past the salad. That quiet, unremarked normalcy was the entire point. Art historians and museum curators later noted that The Cosby Show played a genuine role in introducing African-American visual art to an entire generation of viewers who might never have encountered it otherwise. Not through a documentary, not through a gallery, through a living room couch on a Thursday night. Fact 7. There was a Harvard psychiatrist reading every single script before it was filmed. All right, this one sounds like something I invented. I absolutely did not. Before any episode of The Cosby Show made it to camera, before the actors even got their final scripts, every piece of writing had to go through a review. And not a standard network notes kind of review, where a producer circles things in red pen and sends it back. A full psychological evaluation by a Harvard Medical School professor of psychiatry named Dr. Alvin Poussant. I need you to sit with that for a second. Harvard Medical School professor of psychiatry reading sitcom scripts about a fictional family in Brooklyn before every single episode. For 8 years. Dr. Poussant, who at the time was one of the most respected voices in America on psychology, race, and identity, was hired by Cosby as what you'd call a cultural consultant. In plain terms, his job was to make sure that every script treated the Black family at the center of this show with intelligence, dignity, and honesty. If a character behaved in a way that felt lazy, stereotyped, meaning falling back on tired, reductive cliches, or that undermined the show's core portrait of Black family life, the script got sent back. Not revised with suggestions. Sent back. Write it again. What makes this remarkable is that it was never advertised. The viewers at home had absolutely no idea that the funny scene where Cliff does a silly dance to avoid a real conversation, or the moment where Claire sits her child down and says something so quietly profound it stays with you for decades, all of it had passed through the desk of a Harvard psychiatrist before it ever reached a camera. From the outside, it looked like a very warm, very funny family sitcom, which it was. But underneath the warmth was a level of intentionality, meaning every single creative choice was made on purpose, with a purpose, that almost no other show on television could claim in that era. Dr. Poussaint continued this role for the entire run of the show. 8 seasons, 197 episodes, every single script. The next time you're watching an episode and the dialogue just feels real, grounded, like something an actual human being would say to their actual child. That's not magic. That's a man from Harvard doing his job, from a desk you never knew existed. Fact 6. 2 different networks passed on this show before NBC said yes. Here's the fact that I think should shake every single Cosby Show fan to their absolute core. Brace yourself. The Cosby Show was rejected before it became The Cosby Show. Not once, twice. Bill Cosby first pitched the concept, a show built around an upper-middle-class Black family. The father, an OB-GYN, that means a doctor who delivers babies and specializes in women's health. The mother, a practicing attorney. 5 kids, a beautiful Brooklyn brownstone. No poverty storylines, no urban struggle narrative, no convenient tragedy to explain why the family was successful. He took that pitch to ABC. ABC passed. Their concern, delivered with the kind of confidence only an executive who has never been wrong in their own mind can manage, was that mainstream American audiences wouldn't find it believable. An educated, thriving, affluent Black family as the center of a primetime network sitcom? Too idealistic, too far from expectations, not relatable enough. Let that sit. Take all the time you need. Cosby took the concept to NBC, and NBC nearly said no too. The entertainment president at the time, Brandon Tartikoff, had serious reservations. Family sitcoms had been soft in the ratings. The format felt tired. The network was unsure. But Cosby made a deal. Full creative control. His production company, his team, his rules. NBC stays out of the creative process. In exchange, NBC gets the show. The network, partly desperate for a Thursday night anchor, and partly because turning down Bill Cosby is a bold choice, agreed. The Cosby Show premiered on September 20th, 1984. By the end of its first season, it was the #1 show on American television. It would hold that position for 5 consecutive years. By the time the finale aired in 1992, internal estimates credited the show with generating over $1 billion in revenue for NBC and single-handedly rescuing the network's finances at a time when they were quietly, seriously, struggling. The most profitable show in NBC history, rejected by 2 networks. Real quick, if you're any W here and this is hitting right, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and I drop one of these every single week. You'd genuinely be doing this channel a solid. All right, back to the Huxtables. Fact 5. The one unbreakable rule that changed how the show was written, and why it matters. Every television show runs on rules. Some are about budget, some are about scheduling. The Cosby Show had one rule that almost no other primetime sitcom in 1984 was willing to follow, and it had nothing to do with money. No guns, no drugs, no alcohol. Not as plot devices, not as dramatic consequences, not as teachable moments in a very special episode. They simply did not exist in the Huxtable universe. You would not see them. They were not there. Now, if you grew up watching television in the 1980s and early 90s, you know how genuinely unusual that was. The very special episode where a character would encounter drugs, alcohol, or violence as a vehicle for an important lesson was practically its own genre. It was the thing shows did when they wanted awards attention and rating spikes. Almost every major sitcom of the era had at least one. Cosby refused. His reasoning was direct and unapologetic. He did not want to normalize, meaning make familiar, acceptable, ordinary, the things he didn't want normalized. He wanted viewers, and especially young viewers, to spend time each week inside a home where those things were simply not part of the landscape. Not banned, not dangerous, just absent. Because that's what a functioning, loving household looked like to him. And here is the part that most people miss entirely. That creative restriction made the writing better. When you remove those narrative shortcuts, when you can't fall back on Theo gets peer pressured at a party as your mid-season arc, you have to find your drama somewhere else. In conversation, in the gap between what a parent wants to say and what they actually say. In the way two teenagers argue about something small that's actually about something enormous. You are forced to dig deeper into real human behavior. That constraint, that limitation, is a significant reason why the dialogue in The Cosby Show felt more grounded and more emotionally true than almost anything else in the Thursday night lineup. Necessity, as the saying goes, is the mother of invention. In this case, it was the mother of genuinely good television writing. Watch any episode with this knowledge sitting in the back of your mind, and you'll notice it. Every conversation that might have become a substance abuse storyline on another show becomes something quieter and more intimate instead. That was the trade Cosby made, and the audience felt the difference, even if they never knew why. Fact 4. Claire Huxtable wasn't entirely a written character. She was based on a real woman. Phylicia Rashad's portrayal of Claire Huxtable is, and I will die on this particular hill without any regrets whatsoever, one of the finest performances in the history of American television. She was warm. She was brilliant. She was genuinely funny. She was quietly terrifying when the situation called for it. And she was real in a way that felt almost too good to be something a writer's room invented from scratch. Here's why. A significant part of it wasn't invented at all. The character of Claire Huxtable was, by all accounts, and this is well documented, modeled closely on Camille Cosby, Bill Cosby's real wife. And Camille was not a passive inspiration. She has a doctorate in education. She was a serious, active, creative force behind the show, involved in its tone, its direction, its portrayal of family life. When the writers built the architecture of Claire, her intellectual sharpness, her refusal to ever be reduced to simply the wife, her ability to hold a room without raising her voice, they were building from a real blueprint, a real person who existed. Phylicia Rashad knew this, and she shaped her performance with that knowledge. And then there's the detail that most viewers either never clocked or simply forgot over time. In Season 1, she was listed as Felicia Ayers Allen, her name at the time. Midway through the series, in 1985, she married Ahmad Rashad, the former NFL wide receiver and NBC sports broadcaster, and became Phylicia Rashad. Mid-show, mid-run, different name, same character. And most people just accepted it and moved on, the way you do when your memory is full of more important things, like what you need from the grocery store. It's a small detail, but it's a reminder of something the show was always quietly doing. Behind every character living inside that television, there was a full human being, with a life happening off camera. Sometimes those lives changed the credits. Sometimes they shaped the entire show. Claire Huxtable felt real because she was partially real, and the woman playing her was just as extraordinary as the woman she was playing. Fact 3. The kid who bombed his audition and got the role anyway. Malcolm Jamal Warner was 14 years old when he walked into the audition room for the role of Theo Huxtable, and by his own honest account, the first audition was not good. He was nervous, stiff, and gave a flat, mechanical read of the material that didn't suggest much of the natural charisma the role was going to demand. Bill Cosby, who was deeply hands-on throughout the entire casting process, was not impressed. In most situations, with most production teams, that's where the story ends. Next, kid, thank you for coming in. Someone will be in touch. No, they won't. But something made the team bring Malcolm Jamal Warner back for a second audition, and the second one was entirely different. He came in looser, more himself, more present. He began to improvise, meaning he stepped away from the written script and started responding naturally, in the moment, the way you would in a real conversation rather than a performance. And that's when Cosby stopped the room. Not to shut it down, to pay attention. What Cosby recognized in those second audition moments wasn't just someone who could hit marks and remember lines. It was a kid who could play real, who could hold a scene with grown adults without being swallowed by them, who could hold his own even against Cosby's own natural gravitational pull in a room, and still feel, undeniably, like a teenage boy. Not an actor doing teenage boy, an actual one. Theo Huxtable became, for an enormous number of viewers, the character they identified with most. The kid who wasn't always sure about school, who got it wrong sometimes and had to be guided back, who wanted his father's approval desperately, constantly, even while pretending he was completely indifferent to it. Who grew up across 8 seasons, visibly, genuinely, and became someone entirely different by the time the finale aired. None of that exists if somebody doesn't bring him back for a second try. The next time you watch the scene where Cliff dismantles Theo's argument about not needing good grades, possibly the most famous scene in the entire series, remember, it almost had a completely different kid in it. Someone gave Malcolm Jamal Warner another shot, and he made the most famous TV dad in America look even better because of it. If this video is doing what I hoped it would do, and I think it is because you're still here, drop a comment and tell me which of these facts genuinely surprised you. I read every single one. And while you're in the comments anyway, subscribe! We're just getting to the part that changes everything. Fact 2. The on-screen fallout that accidentally created another iconic show. In 1987, a film called Angel Heart was released. It was dark, provocative, and deeply controversial. And it starred, among others, a 19-year-old actress named Lisa Bonet, who was, at that point, beloved by millions of Americans as Denise Huxtable, the second oldest Huxtable daughter, and one of the breakout characters of the entire series. The film contained content, including explicit scenes, that was a long, dramatic way from anything associated with the warm, wholesome world of the Huxtables. And Bill Cosby was not happy about it. The precise details of what was said privately between them have never been made fully public. What happened on screen, though, told its own story. Denise Huxtable's storylines became noticeably thinner. Her screen time shrank. The warmth that had always surrounded her character seemed to cool. And then, before season 4 was even over, she was written off the main show and placed into a spin-off of her own, A Different World, set at a fictional historically black university called Hillman College. Here is what most people never sat down to really think about. A Different World became a phenomenon, completely independent of what sparked it. At its peak, it was the second highest-rated show on American television, sitting just below The Cosby Show itself. It tackled issues, the AIDS crisis, sexual assault, racial identity, and politics, that The Cosby Show, by its own design and rules, never went anywhere near. It launched careers. It sparked conversations. It became, for many viewers, the more culturally urgent and challenging of the two shows. And it only exists because of a film made in 1987 that caused a behind-the-scenes conflict that nobody was meant to see. Lisa Bonet returned to The Cosby Show briefly and quietly in Season 8, without fanfare, without explanation. The tension between her and Cosby was never publicly resolved in any clear way, but the show born from that conflict went on to leave its own enormous footprint on American television, one that is still felt today. Sometimes the best things in television come from the moments nobody planned. Fact 1. The Thursday night that saved a network, and what it was actually saying to America. All right, we're here, the one I told you about, at the very beginning. The detail that doesn't just surprise you, but reframes the entire show. 8 seasons, 197 episodes, in one completely different light. By 1984, NBC was in trouble, serious trouble. Their Thursday night lineup was underperforming. Their ratings across the board were soft, and getting softer. The network that had once been the undisputed giant of American primetime television was quietly, steadily bleeding, and not in a way that felt temporary. Then, The Cosby Show premiered. Within weeks, it was the most-watched show on television. Within a full season, it had transformed Thursday night from a problem into the most-watched evening on any broadcast network in the country. NBC called it must-see TV, and they would defend that title for the next full decade. Every marquee show that followed, Seinfeld, Friends, ER, was built on the foundation that The Cosby Show laid in the fall of 1984. Without that foundation, those shows don't have the same platform. Maybe they don't happen the same way at all. Internal analysis later estimated that The Cosby Show generated over $1 billion in revenue for NBC over the course of its run. $1 billion. For a network that was struggling to stay competitive when the show began. But here is the detail. Here is the thing I want you to actually sit with. In 1984, when The Cosby Show began, Black families on American primetime television were either absent entirely, pushed to the margins of ensemble casts, or depicted almost exclusively through the lens of economic struggle. There was a very small, very narrow lane that Black television was expected to stay in. And within that lane, there were certain things a Black family was, and certain things they were not. The Huxtable family, wealthy, educated, joyful, complicated, funny, fully human, did not stay in that lane. They didn't acknowledge it existed. There was a Harvard psychiatrist reviewing every script. There was a $1 million art collection on the walls that nobody was pointing at. There was a strict creative rule removing entire categories of safe dramatic shortcuts. There was a character built on a real, extraordinary woman. There was a 14-year-old kid who got a second chance and became one of the most beloved characters of his generation. There was a spin-off born from conflict that became its own cultural landmark. All of it was deliberate. Every single piece of it. Nothing in that brownstone happened by accident. The Cosby Show ran from September 20th, 1984 to April 30th, 1992. 8 seasons, 197 episodes. And when it ended, when that finale aired and Cliff Huxtable danced off the set for the last time in that ridiculous, joyful, completely unscripted way that felt like the truest possible ending to everything the show had been, it left behind something that no network ratings chart has ever been able to fully measure. A generation of viewers, Black and white and every background in between, who had spent 8 years sitting down on a Thursday night to watch a family that had it figured out. Not because life was easy, not because the show pretended the world had no problems, but because week after week, episode after episode, that family chose each other. That's what The Cosby Show was actually about. And that's the detail most people never thought about while they were watching it. Those were 8 facts hiding inside The Cosby Show, a show that ran for 8 seasons, produced 197 episodes, and permanently changed what American television believed was possible. And after all these years, there are still layers to find. Now, if you think that was a lot, you are completely unprepared for what I found in MASH. Because here's the thing about Hawkeye Pierce. He didn't just play a surgeon for 11 seasons. He actually learned surgery. Real procedures, a real scalpel. The kind of thing that, once I explain the full story, makes everything you ever watched in that Korean War operating tent feel completely different. Click right there. I'll meet you in Korea.